I open this reflection with a direct quote from Sermon Seeds, which is a UCC online resource, because it kind of sums up all that is happening in this gospel unto this point. The scene from the early part of Jesus' ministry, right after he has chosen his 12, it feels almost as chaotic to read about it as it must have seemed to those gathered around Jesus. It might be helpful to get a sense of how the Gospel of Mark works. It's not a leisurely journey with long stories and expositions like we hear on the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew, or at the woman at the well, or Nicodemus in John. The Markan Jesus moves constantly. He's always on the go, like a man on a mission. Well, he is a man on a mission. He has little time to spare and even less patience with people who like to criticize everything he does. We're only in the 3rd chapter of Mark now, but a quick read of those first chapters is exhausting. Jesus has gone from his hometown to the wilderness, to Galilee, to the sea, to Capernaum, to a house, to a deserted place, and back out of the towns of Galilee, and that's just the first chapter. Then back to Capernaum, and then home, and then to the sea, and then to Levi's house, then to the grain field, and then to the synagogue, and then back to the sea, and into a boat, before going up a mountain where he gathers his 12 apostles. And then, finally, he goes home. So imagine all this travel with the desperate crowds around him, people from every quarter, clinging to him, begging for healing, begging to be released from demons that have a hold of them. And then picture a group of carping critics picking at everything he did. Breaking the rules about healing on the Sabbath, eating with tax collectors and sinners, and not fasting as they should, or in other words, finding it more lawful to care for human needs and suffering than to cling to the law of the temple. Jesus understood the heart of God's law. Of course, we can understand that the crowds couldn't help themselves. I mean, who among us wouldn't be in a hurry or try anything to get a sick child to a healer who is doing the work that Jesus is doing? Still, it's poignant to see how Jesus couldn't even go home and have a meal in peace, a practice with much greater significance in those times than we have today. In chapter 2, people dig a hole through a roof and drop a paralyzed person right next to him, hoping for a cure. And after admiring their faith and handling the criticism of the scribes, he forgives the man, and then Jesus tells him to get up and walk. That healing amazes the crowd, of course, and makes Jesus even more sought after. But it really gets the attention of the powers that be, which explains why they're back again, all the way from Jerusalem here in the 3rd chapter. As Jesus tries once more to go into a house and take a break from all this activity. And the problem is, well, crowd control. The crowd persists, so much so that Jesus can't even have supper with his friends, his disciples. But he isn't surrounded only by people who are willing to admit their brokenness and their need, along with institutional critics who we suspect by this time are looking to find fault with Jesus' ministry rather than affirm the wonderful thing God is doing in him. The growing crowd also includes, of all people, the family of Jesus. His mother, his brothers, and his sisters, who can't even get inside the house and talk to him face to face. Now this brings us to the part that many just glance over or shrug off as ancient superstition, because what the ancient world viewed as demonic possession, today we know as, well, other conditions. What was demonic then, we now can explain as deafness, blindness, epilepsy, mental illness, even allergies. Anything that could not be explained, the devil got the blame. Which would give us a long list to blame the devil on today, wouldn't it? But the exorcism isn't really the point of the story. The point of the story, the point is the power of sin isn't going to cast itself out. It's not going to grab itself by its collar and carry itself out of the room. It's not going to cast itself out. Why? Because it is doing a great job of dividing a community, creating distraction from the truth. And the truth is, people will be forgiven their sins. And that is what truly the scribes are upset about. Without sin management, which is the scribes and Pharisees' job, there'd be no order. We cannot proclaim who is with the in crowd and who is with the out crowd. We can't control who comes in and out the doors. Which then brings us to the next part of the text. Jesus' family. We didn't know exactly what prompted Jesus' mother and brothers to come and, give him a talking to. But it may have been the stirring up of the crowds. It may even have been the exorcisms. Jesus was changing the conversation around sin and heaven, and it scared some people. And his family might have been just scared for him too. Justly so, as we see by the end of the story. It may have been they felt he needed a break. We just don't know. But here in the midst of a bickering and of the crowds and the confusion and the family trying to push in and other people probably yelling, hey, we were here first and you're wrong about Jesus. No, you're wrong about Jesus. No, Jesus, heal me. Jesus, can you teach me? In the middle of this confusion, someone pauses and says, Jesus, your family's here. And Jesus looks around in this hustle and bustle and people pushing in and everybody trying to get in this house where he just wanted to take a break. He looks around at everybody there and says, you are my family. Right here, right now. Whoever does the will of God is my brother, my sister, my mother. The family of Jesus, his mother and brothers, make their way through much of the crowd to reach the outside door of the house where Jesus is sitting. And some scholars note that even such a small detail is significant. Judith Hawk-Ray says that house is a key word here. And the understanding of who is on the inside and who is on the outside of the house is central meaning to this passage. So who is on the inside and who is on the outside of the house? Who is on the inside or the outside of the church? That is a question that comes at me from so many different directions. It stirs me up. It upsets me. It brings pain and it brings joy. It brings understanding. It brings confusion all at once. And maybe I've been paying a bit more attention to this lately, maybe because it is Pride Month. I don't know. I think it started actually on Facebook, of all odd places. Someone asked, literally, this was a legitimate question, they were being sincere, they wanted to know what the definition of cisgendered was, C-I-S, gender. And some of you may never have heard this term, but most of you are. Ryan Ashley Caldwell, who's a sociologist, explained it this way. It's when the gender you were assigned at your birth actually lines up with the cultural gender expectations for presentation once older. It's as if you're saying yes to your assigned birth and gender. The doctor says it's a boy, you go, yes, I'm a boy, and you're done. And she says, of course, this all assumes a binary system and not a fluid or gender queer identity. This is a great description, and it's all very scientific until one person claims, this is from the conversation, it's the labels used to divide and separate. I choose to engage, and I pointed out that these are more terms to help us to understand our differences, lift them up, let them be glorified and be celebrated. Well, the person on Facebook didn't like that too much. And so he said this: the less united we are as a population through divisive labels, the more manipulation can occur by the media. Ding, 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 alarm bells going off already. The more control can occur by the government. We can no longer be his name, identified by those that know me with my quirks and foibles, etc. We now have to be known by our labels: race, color, religion, national origin, age, sex, pregnancy, citizenship, familial status, disability, veteran, genetic information. And yes, all the above are protected with the only class of people remaining without protection are white males 19 to 39 years of age, unless they are a religion other than Christian, are married, are disabled, or a veteran. Well, I'm kind of assuming that this guy is a young white male between the age of 18 and 39, single, and considers himself Christian. Yikes. I did not engage the conversation any further. But it does raise the question, who is in and who is out? Who is my family? Before I started writing this, I happened to catch the pride flag raising from Hart Plaza in Detroit. Now, when I was young and living in Detroit, we could barely have a pride rally for fear of retaliation. And now they have a month of waving the pride flag. It's raised with the mayor present and city council people are present. It's really amazing to see how far my hometown has come. And yet, it was pointed out that just a few days before, a young transgender person of color was murdered. This Wednesday morning, as I was writing this sermon, a minister who is serving in the UCC church shared some pain. She wrote, "This last Sunday during my sermon, I revealed that I was transgender and transitioning. I should begin by saying we are an ONA congregation, and the leadership of the church already knew I was transgender. The initial response from the congregation was either positive and supportive or neutral. I heard nothing that was negative to my face. All day Monday, I was in the office and not a word was said to me about my revelation. There was a great deal more silence in my presence than normal from the church staff who were also on the council. Quote, I know, bad idea, small congregation, old practices die hard." Then, she goes on to say, "I found out last night that our council president had called in our associate general minister to attend our council meeting this evening and did so without the consult of other folks on the council. She asked, please pray for that tonight's meeting will be civil, that love will prevail, and God's will be done." So I reached out to her and she said basically, "I am treading water right now." No one should have to tread water in the United Church of Christ, or any church for that matter. This is unacceptable, and yet it goes on day after day. Sometimes in more subtle ways. I've heard if we hire a gay pastor, they will turn us into a gay church. Then again, if we had a church full of gay people, it might be fun. I don't know, it'd be just nice to see a full church. Gay, straight, whatever else in between. Oh, it's okay to be a gay pastor, just don't talk about it. Oh, I broke that rule, sorry. Here's one I got from the LAPD while I was in the process of being approved as one of their chaplains. Please do not evangelize your openly gay agenda. I'm not sure what that would even mean, although thoughts from the 70s, there was a little notepad that said gay things to do today. Laundry, cooking, shopping. To this day, there are 70 countries that still have anti-homosexuality laws on the books. There are 8 countries where it's punishable by death. And yet our own administration opposed a resolution condemning the use of death penalty as punishment for consensual gay relationships. It still passed the UN without our consent. One other note about this week is this Sunday, this very morning, they are celebrating Pride in Los Angeles, which incidentally was founded by 2 Christian ministers and a political activist. Bob Humphreys, founder of the United States Mission, Morris Kite, a founder of the Gay Liberation Front, and the Reverend Troy Perry, the founder of Metropolitan Community Churches. He came up with the idea as a way to commemorate the 1-year anniversary of the Stonewall riots. But before all the festivities started this morning, before the parade could even begin, thousands of people on bicycles arrived. They rode 545 miles from San Francisco to Los Angeles, raising $65.5 million for the San Francisco AIDS Foundation and the Los Angeles LGBT Center, both supplying life-saving services to people living with HIV and AIDS. Who is my family? Who is in and who is out? This week, in the light of the Baker's ruling, another UCC clergy wrote a letter, an open letter to the UCC. Now, some of you have seen it already if you have the internet or if you're in the Bible study it was sent out. But for those who didn't get to see it, I want to share it with you because this young man speaks from his heart to our church as a denomination. He says, an open letter to the UCC, the LGBTQ right to distrust God, even the progressive church. For my beloved United Church of Christ, I have written in my ordination papers, essays in seminary, and many other forums my love for this denomination as an out LGBTQ clergy person and Christian. This is Pride Month 2018. However, it is time to issue a loving challenge. 25% of congregations open and affirming, 33 years of the open and affirming ONA statement, and many other signs and sacrifices for the LGBTQ community in the national setting and the local settings of the UCC, including countless congregations and individual members' departures. But that was a great start. Thank you, UCC, for your dedication, help, and sacrifice. I know how hard your work for LGBTQ people has been. Sometimes splitting congregations, families, friendships, and decimating church budgets. Likewise, I know sometimes it has brought new life to congregations in need of new inclusive vision. Members, it's brought hope. And I look for more examples of the latter as we move forward as a faith tradition into an uncertain future. That said, he says, I want to address the attitude in the UCC. Shock when LGBTQ people don't understand that this denomination is a safe space. Moreover, I have witnessed, quote, straight privileged anger, indignation, and desperate need for gratitude. Opening and affirming churches want gratitude from the LGBTQ community, which is something we really cannot emotionally provide. In order to be theologically healthy and authentic as an open and affirming movement, we need to first affirm the following difficult reality. The LGBTQ community does not owe the United Church of Christ anything in return for its theologically driven move towards inclusion, even if that has meant great sacrifices. We are delighted to be included in pews and pulpits and pastorates and pensions, but the wider LGBTQ families hurt and continued endangerment, especially with the political climate, is greater than anything the UCC alone can heal, apologize for, or save us from. Additionally, LGBTQ spiritual gifts, theology, and radically unique perspective on liberation didn't end with marriage equality. Marriage equality is not synonymous with LGBTQ liberation. There is so much more wisdom, capacity, and value yet untapped by the UCC from our diverse queer perspectives and fabulous presence. The UCC's openness is deeply appreciated by those of us in the community who have chosen to do the hard work, daily, complicated, painful, of reclaiming and living as religious Christians, but it doesn't mean that gay and queer people owe you, the institution, our love and devotion. ONA isn't transactional in that way. The popular attitude that the UCC is a gift that the LGBT community is looking for but hasn't found yet must be tempered with an understanding that the church PTSD is real even for those who have never been inside a church. As an example, he goes on and says, I have never been inside a haunted house attraction. or a haunted corn maze. But I know that it would not be a safe, fun, or good experience for me. I know that from my outside experience with horror movies and people jumping at me and even being alone in Plymouth Church at night. Yes, this is a very scary building when empty. Every experience I have informs me to stay away from haunted houses. Likewise, even for the gay community, people who have never had direct experience with church, not even to mention the countless who have been emotionally abused and damaged by our wider Christian family, convincing us, the LGBT community people, that churches are safe and trustworthy is a multi-generational, long-term effort that must be rooted in meaningful mission and ministry rather than money and marketing. I have yet, sticking with my above example, to be convinced that a haunted house would result in anything other than a heart attack and my own early demise on the spot. In short, we are a hard sell. Having an out minister doesn't cure the fear or fulfill your own a promise. Yes, I can speak with my friends and sometimes open doors of understanding, but I am not called to evangelize the LGBTQ community. Hiring me or my predecessor didn't mean a cure to any fear others have. If anything, it just means that Gerhard, his partner, and him have a lot of trouble finding friends who understand me or want to be around us. And I never ever blame anyone for this. I knew what I was signing on for. It is a sacrifice I have been willing to make. It does mean that I understand and respect the healthy distance people who have been hurt need to keep from religion. Even if that means keeping me out as a gay clergy person at a distance too. It's just too risky. It's confusing or painful to befriend even a gay minister for some. The LGBTQ community still has the right to distrust God of Christianity after 2,000 years of oppression and continued alienation like yesterday. He was writing this on the heels of the Supreme Court ruling. The UCC must continue in our open and affirming journey, and that means understanding that what we have begun in reconciliation, love, and radical inclusion is only the beginning of what could take generations of queer acceptance to heal. We do this work of openness not for ourselves or full pews or our budgets, but we do it for God and for Jesus Christ who love we are called to embody. Yesterday, the Supreme Court ruled that a local Colorado cake baker could deny a gay couple a wedding cake because of his belief in God and religious liberty. That is actually not what the ruling says. It's much more narrow than that, but that is what many in the community heard. For that decision to come down in June is particularly difficult. June is Pride Month, and we celebrate our liberation from straight patriarchy, beginning with the Stonewall riots in New York in 1969. So this decision is jarring for many. It is days like yesterday that I find it incredibly difficult to justify church, God, and religion to my community as a Christian minister of the gospel. It is days like yesterday when responses like, sorry, you should try UCC, don't lump us in with those Christians. Or as I like to say, hashtag not that kind of Christian. We are just as angry as you, and God loves you. We really promise that. It just doesn't work. Not in moments like this. It breaks my heart to watch my Facebook feed crumble in pain, alienation, and anger after yesterday's verdict. It hurts even more to have to admit that my ministry and my Facebook posts can't fix it, and neither can the UCC alone with one generation. It isn't really about the dang cake. We LGBTQ individuals and our straight allies alike all know that we make better, tastier, more creative cakes anyway when it comes right down to it. You know it's true. But it's really about systematic pain of rejection, of family alienation, and discrimination happening when trying to do something as simple as order a giant, glorified pastry for a party with a loved one. For God's sake, it isn't about a cake. It is about everything else that matters. There is hope yet. There is hope yet, friends, in grace, he says. Now, this is a word many of us only know if we ventured into Wesleyan theology territory like I did for seminary, but it can mean so much right now for us in the United Church of Christ. Grace means more than changing ourselves. It means more than changing our words. It means more than opening our doors and then assuming that we no longer carry cultural pain. It means coming to terms with our own privilege and understanding the weight of the history of this wider institution outside of our control. Grace also means understanding when our invitation of open and affirming welcome isn't meant with enthusiastic embrace. The turning of the Titanic takes a great amount of time. Grace is the humility to know that the doors may have to remain open for a very long time before anyone feels safe enough to trust this institution. Love is loving those who never will enter our churches and never become pledging units because we are called by God Almighty to do so. Becoming O&A isn't a marketing scheme to fill pews. It is a theological statement on the level of theodicy. Grace is a grace for ourselves when we don't get it right. Grace is love for others when they aren't quite ready to accept our invitation to a loving community as we know it. Grace is what God holds us all in at this time of transformation for the open and affirming movement. Grace is what happens when we see that open and affirming is more than a marketing statement. When taken seriously, it is part of the wider systematic theology of inclusion that has the power to transform all of us into better people. All of us together. Or even, especially those whom we now accept will never join or visit the church. If we accept that, it's okay. And he concludes with your love and pride, the Reverend Jake Miles Joseph, or just Jake, Associate Minister of Plymouth Congregational Church, UCC, Fort Collins, Colorado. Who is in and who is out? Who is our family? The basic reminder here is our work isn't done just by an O&A statement. And we do the work. I'm proud to say you're doing the work. And it isn't just around LGBTQ community. It's about white privilege. It's about how do we reach out to our immigrant brothers and sisters? How do we feed the hungry? How do we care for those who are suffering from mental illness of one form or another? How do we grieve for those who are still afraid to walk in our doors? How do we find a way to tell them it's okay? A parade is fun, but just being there isn't enough. A rainbow on our door in the back. Yeah, right now it's the best we can do, but it isn't enough. I'd rather see it flying high over the front, but I don't want just a rainbow there. I want something that says that we acknowledge our white privilege, and we know where we come from, and we know we have work to do. We have work to do. How that takes place? How does that happen? It happens in our day-to-day with each other and the community around us. See, the O&A statement, which transliterates into all the other movements we're trying to understand and embrace, needs to be written on our hearts, not on a piece of paper. So during this Pride Month, this the only Pride sermon I'm giving, may the O&A movement fill your heart. May the grace of God touch your heart with the energy to reach out and know you're going to be rejected. To reach out and say, we understand why you're not coming. to reach out and say it's okay, because just by doing that, that could break that wall down. Who is and who's out? The answer is in today's gospel. Those who do the loving work of God are my family. We are family. Amen.